Hello and welcome to the Kids Teaching Kids podcast. In this podcast, we have high schoolers and other individuals come on and answer questions that middle schoolers have about high school. Whether it be band, choir, orchestra, or just general high school life, we're going to cover it all, so make sure to stay tuned if you want to learn something new. I am your host, Laksh Gulati, and today we are going to be talking about college admissions. We've collected a group of questions from middle schoolers and picked out the most popular ones to answer for you today. I am joined by Kshitij Gulati, a recent master's graduate of the University of Rochester in data science. He applied to 16 schools and was accepted into 10 of them, including the University of Maryland College Park, with a 50% scholarship. I am also joined by Laksh Gulati, a recent graduate of Frisco High School, who will be attending the University of Texas at Austin for electrical and computer engineering starting this fall. He was also accepted into some notable schools such as Purdue University. Without further ado, let's start with the questions. So, Laksh, what does the college admissions process look like? Can you give us a brief overview of it?
So you have to very briefly and concisely summarize what you have put together in your profile throughout high school. So this will be your extracurricular activities, your coursework, your volunteering. The Common App is the most used one by the colleges. So you'll have 650-word essay to write about pretty much anything you want. You'll have 10 slots to put in these extracurricular activities. You'll submit your transcript and your grades, and you have to just summarize what you've done.
Yeah, and so Kshitij, can you explain how that process sort of differs? Because you did a master's and you're actually from India, so can you explain how it's different for international students and how undergrad differs?
There are a lot of similarities in the application process for undergrad and masters. There are also some big differences. The difference being that most people coming into master's programs have already worked in the industry for a while. So besides your academics and all the usual stuff that you do mention in your undergrad, you also significantly talk about your work experience and why that has led you to go into a master's program.
Yeah, so I know you submit a resume and you're going to submit some of your action items such as volunteering, your grades and things like that for your college application. But I know a big part of the college application is essays because they want to see who you really are past just your numbers, right? So can you talk a little bit about the essays? How do those work and what should people write about to stand out to the admissions officers?
Yeah, standing out is definitely one aspect of it. But when you're writing your essay, a key thing to keep in mind is you don't want the admissions counselor to get bored. So you don't want it to be very flat and boring. It's always better to put it in the form of a story, with a nice start and a conclusion. So whoever is reading it actually takes interest in your life story and can actually relate with what you want to do and who you are.
Yeah, so Laksh, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, so they will already have your grades, your profile, all of the stuff you've submitted that you've done, all the content, they'll already have it. The essays really serve to give you a personality so they can differentiate between you and the guy that's just only good at getting grades. That's one skill that you need to have, but it's not everything. You have to show who you are as a person, and as Kshitij said, it's important to be able to show what you're going to do with your experience in college and how it's going to help you in your future.
Yeah, so I think one piece of advice that was given to me while I'm still working on my application is that no one's going to remember your name, but they are going to remember something you did or something that you sort of went through. So like, let's just say you built a really cool app, right? No one's going to remember your name, but then at the end of the day, once the college admissions officers are going to go talk, they're going to be like, oh, remember that kid who built that app? So I think having something like that and then writing an essay about it could be really good.
The essay is very important to make the stuff on your resume come to life. When you submit on your Common App, I think you get, I don't know how many characters, but it's a very small amount. You can barely write a few sentences about what it is. And so your essays really allow you to explain what that activity is and why it's important if it doesn't come across straight up with just the name. Let's say you have Stanford Camp. That comes off on its own, that Stanford is on my resume. But if it's some other smaller thing that you did on your own, it's not going to have the same value in the 200 character description that you give. So that's where the essays serve.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And, a very important point that you mentioned is it really gives you a personality, and also re-emphasizing the point that when the college, counselors talk or the admissions counselors talk, right? They always remember something different that you have done and that you have mentioned in your application. Naturally, it's all mentioned in your resume and in the separate fields where you talk about your activities, but your essay is a way to tie it all up together. So each activity that you have done, if you think it's of significant importance, it ties into your personality and ties into your story. So I think that that's definitely a thing to keep in mind when you're writing your essays.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, college applications are just a lot of work. So when do you think people should start preparing for their applications?
What do you mean? Preparing is from this 8th grade summer. You need to start preparing for it so that you're ready to go. Because you're going to want to take coursework to show them that you're ready for the major you're applying for. There's going to be prerequisites for those higher end courses by your junior and senior year. It's important to have preparation for that, because if I decide in my junior year I want to major in computer science and I just start with CS1, then there's 3 more years of classes that I can't take because I've figured it out too late. Also, it's very important to have consistency in your activities. So if you woke up in your junior year, they're going to see it on your application. If freshman year, sophomore year, you haven't done very much, it'll be empty, and then everything will be concentrated towards the later end of your high school. So if you, let's say, I start planning in 8th grade, I sign up for one volunteering organization and then one technical thing related to my major. Then by the time I'm applying for my college, I already have 4 years of volunteering experience consistently throughout high school. And then I'll have 4 years of technical activities. So it shows I have interest in my major. It's very important to start early on that. Otherwise, it can come off as inconsistent or kind of a last minute effort.
I agree. Having a plan, I think, is extremely important, because once means we've seen people who will take their freshman, sophomore, and a lot of their junior year as light work. They'll be having fun, going out, partying, and then college applications come around and they're like, they get a whack in the head. They're like, what happened? We spent the last 3 years slacking off, and now we have to figure out how to catch up. Versus if you start the second you get into school, it'll be a lot easier, especially once you get to the start of senior year, because you won't have to, the only thing you're going to be worrying about is your essays.
Yeah, your senior year is all about putting it all together in a way that's appealing to the college.
Yeah.
If you're trying to put content on your resume in your senior year, you're probably too late.
Yeah, I agree, and consistency is definitely something that admissions committee really, really values. And if you're making a last-ditch effort, they can always tell.
The next question we have here is, what extracurriculars should I take to appeal to colleges?
One big elective, I would say, for me, it was band. Some people do athletics, they play sports. You're going to want one big thing like that you can carry throughout your 4 years. Because as we've been talking about, that consistency is very important.
Yeah, I agree. Pick one thing and definitely excel at it. It's always better to be really good at one thing than to be average or below average at 5 things. So for me, I was a tennis player all throughout high school, and throughout my undergrad, I was the captain of the tennis team. So that is definitely something that I highlighted on my application, and that's not something a lot of other people have. And this is definitely one of the things that helped me stand out. And another thing that colleges really value is volunteering. And not just showing up for volunteering, but taking initiative and taking on leadership positions in a volunteering organization, which is again something I did and really helped me stand out in my applications. So athletics, volunteering, these are definitely 2 things that most colleges value quite a lot.
Yeah, I think having something else, like you said, with the consistency, like you didn't play tennis when you went for your master's, but still having the thing to show that you're, a person who has passions and other interests rather than just school. I think because colleges don't want to accept people who are only focused on grades, right? But they want to see people who have passions and other interests like tennis or band, even if you don't continue that throughout college.
Yeah, they definitely want to see someone who's, just beyond what's on paper and beyond the numbers and the grades, and definitely someone who tries to go out of their way, what you do with your time besides academics. So that is definitely something that they're very interested in, and definitely something that you should highlight on your application, in your essays, and whatever chance you might get.
Yeah, so for Laksh, he's doing engineering at UT Austin, but for him, he's not even doing band in college, but having his 7 years of band all the way from middle sixth grade to his senior year, he had some more depth to him as a character, and I know he had some good experiences in band that he could have written about in his essays, so it sort of gives you more options. It'll give you new experiences that like sort of change how you view applications, and it'll help you when you do finally write your essays. So I know a lot of people are concerned about their academics because high school classes are harder. So are grades really that important when it comes to applying to college, or is it just a side thing?
Yes, so they're very important, unfortunately. Grades are kind of that filtering aspect for the college. That if you have them, great, now you're back to step zero. That they just get you on the map. If you don't have the grades, they're not going to look at the rest of your application. But if you do, on their own, they're not worth anything. So you need the good grades paired with the rest of your profile, with your essays, your extracurriculars. When it all comes together, it's very important.
Yeah, I agree with Laksh. Grades are not everything, but they're definitely very important. And it's not just about the final number, what your GPA is at the end when you apply, but also it's about improvement. So I personally did not have a very high GPA in the beginning of my undergrad, but I consistently strived and I showed consistent improvement. So that is also something that colleges value, because they have your transcript for all the years, right? So they can see the path that you took and how your grades gradually improved or gradually stayed the same or declined. So they can see that path, and that is also something that they take into consideration. And also, coming to the filtering aspect, I don't think they necessarily filter you based on it, but it definitely does put you on the map. And they do make exceptions for some candidates with lower grades, but it's always better if you don't rely on that. You don't want to rely, when you're looking to get admitted into a particular college, right? You don't want to rely on the fact that they're going to make an exception for you, because they only do that for maybe 1, 2, or 3 candidates. They don't do it for everyone. So having, a decent grade is definitely very, very important.
Yeah, means I don't know if they would use it as a complete filter to say if you don't have a 90 and above, they won't even look at your application. But I think it means a way you could put it is it's almost like an immediate turnoff for colleges to say, oh, he has really bad grades. That's like they just get a quick ick.
It's their first impression.
Yeah, grades are going to be your first impression. And so right off the bat, if you're starting with C's, D's, your colleges are going to be like, okay, this kid better have something really good going on or he's out, So that, like Kshitij was saying, they make very, very few exceptions for students with lower grades, because like maybe a couple of candidates in the college, because there's so many kids who have the grades, and then they have the extracurriculars, and they have the volunteering, and they have everything on top of it. So it means unless you have some world championship thing to add on top of your resume, I wouldn't count on your grades not being important. So I know a lot of schools actually have optional SAT and ACT submissions. Some of them are required, some of them aren't. Should people bother preparing for it, or does it not really affect their application?
Okay, so I guess the way to see this is, in today's world, you have kids just wondering, what do I do to get into these schools? Because you'll have the valedictorian of this great school who's the president of 5 clubs who won't get into Harvard, and he'll wonder why. And it's just, you'll keep wondering what it is, because no one knows the exact recipe for the college admissions. When people get in, they don't say you got in because of that volunteering organization or your grades. They won't tell you that.
It's like a holistic view.
Yeah. That's my least favorite term, holistic review, because it means everything matters. There's no one thing that will take you to success. You have to do it all and put it together in a way that's appealing to the college. So I guess SAT and ACT is kind of that one thing that's left, other than your grades, that a certain number is not necessary, but it will boost my application. That at this threshold, I know it's giving a positive impact. It's not hurting my application. It's just giving them one more standardized thing, because it's one of those things that's not still a question. It's a definite answer that the score is helpful.
Yeah, it's college applications are not like you can submit one thing that's fantastic and you get in. It's like every single thing you do they will look at, and everything you do has to be really good. So like it's almost like a point system. Like every little activity you do, you get 10 points, right? And then so the more good activities you do, not like useless activities, but every good activity you do, you get like 10 points. And so if you have a good SAT or ACT score, that's like another 10 points just added onto your application. So it's just, if you're going up next to someone who has the same thing as you, but he has an SAT score and you don't, he's probably going to get it and you won't. So that's just how it works. It's just like a more icing on the cake, if you will.
Yeah, standardized scores are definitely, a differentiating factor to a certain extent. Think of it this way, right? You're competing with thousands of applicants, and there's going to be a bunch of them that have like a similar GPA to you and, have done activities and so on, right? So, two people, they both say have like a 3.9 GPA, they both did 3 activities and excelled at them. But one person, has a standardized score and one person does not. Who do you think they're going to pick? The one with the standardized score, right? So it's definitely, a differentiating factor. And also, if your GPA is not that good, having a really good score on the standardized test also does make up for it to a certain extent. So that is also something you want to keep in consideration.
Yeah, and also when you are studying for the SAT or ACT, there's like a lot of people think that because they're not as financially privileged and they can't afford like really good tutors that they can't study. But this is actually quite the opposite, because some of the kids with the highest scores that I've seen have studied on Khan Academy for free. Khan Academy is a great tool. There's other great tools on the internet that you can use to study, so that you can do just out of the comfort of your own home. So I don't think there's really any excuse to say, oh, I can't afford it, because it's free online.
It is a money game in a way, because all these SAT prep places that are known to churn out these high SAT scores and ACT scores cost thousands of dollars, and not everyone has the money to spend on that. Even though there are resources online, it's not the same as having a teacher in front of you that gets paid good money to teach you what you need to learn.
This this entire applications process is almost a game. You have to figure out what the judge likes, and then you have to appeal to the judge, right? So but then like Laksh is saying, I think having that money boosts you, because you can afford all of the like 10 out of 10 tutors who churn out really great applicants. But then at the same time, some of the best applications have a good story of how people come from nothing and then they still manage to outcompete everyone in their school. That's a stellar story to tell.
Those stories are much more important than any standardized score.
Yes, you need to prioritize your experiences throughout your high school career. If you struggled in the past, it means good. You have something to tell, because a lot of kids come from extremely privileged families. They haven't seen any struggle, and means college applications don't like those as much, because it's almost like everything was handed on a silver platter. So if you're especially from like an underprivileged family and you worked your way to the top, that's impressive.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's also very important. If you don't have all the resources, it's not the end of the world. And having a strong story that speaks volumes to who you are is definitely going to add more value to your application than the standardized score. Not saying standardized scores are not important, but they're not everything.
Yeah. So I think one thing we can take away is that everyone loves a hard worker. Admissions officers love a hard worker. Your teachers love a hard worker. And so when it comes to teachers, I know one of the aspects is recommendation letters. So how do recommendation letters work? Who should write them for me? Which of my teachers, how does that whole process work?
So you'll know which teacher you want to write for you. You won't have to do much thinking, because it'll come to your mind that this teacher knows me the best. This teacher likes me the most. You can tell. there's always like some of my friends hang out in the same teacher's room before school every single day, and it's very obvious to them that they're going to ask that teacher for the rec letter. If you're not able to think of it like that, then you want teachers that have had you for multiple years. Ones where you're good at their classes. Obviously, you don't want to have. If you're bad at English, you don't want your English teacher writing your rec letter. Just you'll know your teachers who like you. They'll write something good. You just want to make sure they have some content to write about you. So some of my teachers actually asked, "What do you want me to talk about?" And I was able to tell some of them what I'm planning to do in the future, why I want to go to college, the similar questions on your application and your essays. And that gives another consistency is everywhere, that it adds up. When your teacher is saying the same thing that you're writing on your essay, then they know to take you seriously, that you're not messing around. You do want to accomplish what you've said, and you're not just writing the essay to give them what they want to hear.
Yeah, I think it all sort of ties together, right? You know, being a hard worker in class proves to your teacher that you're a good kid. You get good grades, which is also good for your application. So it all sort of, and then having that good, when the teacher loves you and having that good recommendation letter is really powerful, because, you know, everything up until this point has been coming from you. And so, you know, there's obviously going to be a lot of fluff incorporated with that and, you know, exaggerations. But when it comes from your teacher, like Laksh was saying, if the teacher's story lines up with yours and you're both saying how you loved engineering or film or business, and you know you were working on it in class and talking to your teacher about it, if those two come together, then that's going to come for a really powerful application.
Yeah, I think a couple of things you want to keep in mind is you want the rec letter to complement your application and also to provide credibility, right? So you want it to basically whatever that you mentioned in your essay, you want the rec letter to complement that. And the credibility aspect is that you want your teacher to validate everything that you put on your essay. So it's definitely better to have a conversation with them. Don't just say, write me a rec letter. They get a request and, you know, they write whatever comes to their mind. You want to discuss what you're talking about in your essays, what your goals are, and, you know, why you want to go to college. And there's definitely a conversation you want to have with them, I would say a couple of months in advance. So you give them enough time to think over that and what they're going to write in your recommendation letter. And also another thing you want to keep in mind is that you want the recommendation letter from a teacher to be very personalized to who you are. You don't want a generic rec letter, because a generic rec letter does a lot more damage. You want a very personalized recommendation letter. You wanted the recommendation letter to feel like the teacher actually knows you and has known you for a significant amount of time, can actually relate with your values and your goals. So these are, you know, few things I would keep in mind.
Yeah, I think communication is really important, obviously, with the teacher, to say, I'm working on this, and so can you like talk about that? You know, obviously give them a lot of time. Like you were saying, how generic rec letters are actually probably going to do a lot of bad, because as an admissions officer, if a student was allowed to pick any teacher throughout their high school career, and they picked their favorite teacher, and that teacher wrote them the most generic rec letter saying, "Oh yeah, he's a great kid. He did, you know, he was pretty good in class." That would be quite terrifying for me, because that's saying that not a single teacher really knew you or liked you or appreciated you. And so knowing the teacher personally really helps. Even like once you leave their class, you can still talk to them, have conversations beyond just academics. What are you doing with your life? What are they doing with their life? You know, almost treat them with respect, like a friend, sort of get to know them more, let them get to know you. So that way, when this time comes around, you have something for them to go off of.
Yeah, and it definitely helps if in the rec letter they, you know, mention one or two stories or instances where you really excelled in their class or in an activity. So mentioning those stories adds even more credibility to your application. So that is also something that you want to discuss with them to, you know, maybe mention in your rec letters.
Unfortunately, you can't read what they write, but you can discuss what you want them to talk about before. So
Yeah.
don't expect to be able to read what they're writing for you.
Yeah, so the rec letters, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but the recommendation letters are actually private from the students. So the teacher will write it and send it straight to all of your colleges. You don't get to read it, you don't get to approve it, because they want like 100% honest, make sure that they wrote it, not you, and you didn't fabricate something.
And that's why it's very important to pick the teacher that you know will have something good to say about you.
Yeah, if you're not sure whether you want to ask a teacher or not, you probably shouldn't ask that teacher. The teachers you ask should be 100%, I love this teacher loves me, we have great conversations, I'm a great student. Those are the kind of teachers you want to pick.
That's another thing planning from freshman year. If you want to keep your relationships with your teachers going, you don't want it to be in your junior year somewhere you're thinking who to ask, and you're saying that my math teacher freshman year really liked me, but I haven't spoken to her in 2 years now. Can I still ask you? So you want to keep those relationships going genuinely, because they can tell when you're coming to them because you want a letter, and they can tell when you're having conversations with them because of a genuine interest in maintaining that relationship.
Yeah, I think one thing is like the best way to be genuine is to genuinely just be genuine. You can't like fake being genuine. It's not a thing that you can fabricate out of thin air. It just comes naturally. So take genuine interest in what your teacher's talking about. Ensure that they take genuine interest in what you're talking about. Create like a real solid relationship between them that's not fabricated or fake. Don't go to their class thinking, oh, I'm going to be a great student so that at the end of the year they can write me a rec letter, because teachers are not dumb. They can see through you. They've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of students. They know what a genuine relationship looks like and what a fake relationship looks like when you just want something out of them. So yeah, the best way to combat that is really just to be genuine and take interest in what they have to say, and they'll reciprocate those feelings to you. So we have one last question for both of you. What is the best and worst piece of advice you've received about college admissions?
Best piece of advice I would say is to always be doing something, because you will have free time in class. You'll get off of class 20 minutes early, can get your math homework done in that time, so when you go home you can focus on the longer term goals. And it's difficult to do as a high school student because you just want to get everything done with and then go hang out with your friends, which that's important. You want to set aside time for that, but you cannot have it be taking over everything else. You have to make sure when you have free time, you're making good use of it. And of course, your mental health is important, so you continue hanging out with your friends. But don't waste away your time.
Yeah, I think having a good group of friends is really important. Like, you know what they say, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you spend time with 5 people just smoking weed all day, they're not doing any studies, they're not doing their work, that's probably what you're going to end up doing. And so, like Laksh said, if you're not...
pay very well either.
Oh, yeah, no, smoking weed is not a professional job, and you don't get a lot of money for that. Spending a lot of your free time working on something like a passion project even. I know Laksh has a huge interest in cars, and so he loves engineering and he loves cars. So he's like, how can I combine these two? He realized that car mods were extremely difficult to research, so he was attempting to make a website that sort of cures that problem. So he took genuine interest in something, and so a lot of his free time went into that website. And then colleges saw that and were like, okay, he actually cares. He's not fabricating his passion for cars out of thin air, but he genuinely loves cars, and that just adds more depth to him as a character.
Most of the time, they probably did not even look at my website. So that's where the essays come in again. You got to talk about this stuff in your essays to make sure they know how important it is to you.
Yeah, and if you're not doing anything, then you have no experience and you have nothing to write about. And I promise you, you do not want to write about smoking weed in your college essays.
Oh, I definitely agree. Yeah. I think the best piece of advice that I received was don't be one-dimensional, do something beyond your grades and academics, and that's definitely something that I try to emulate. And in the last couple of years of my undergrad, I've worked on, a lot of research projects, a lot of professors, because I was really interested in AI and data science, and that's what I wanted to pursue further. So I spent a lot of time on that. And that's definitely something that I spoke in my applications and the admissions interviews, and that's definitely something that they took a lot of interest in. So that was the best piece of advice I got. The worst piece of advice I got, I think, was you don't have good enough grades, you can forget about going for your master's degree. Grades are the end of the world, and I think that's definitely false because you know in the beginning of my undergrad, I did not have a very high GPA, but what I showed in my application process was consistent improvement. So in the beginning of my undergrad, I was probably in the bottom 20% of my school, but by the time I graduated, I was in the top 10%. So what they care more than your final GPA is how you've improved over the 4 years. So that is definitely something that they value, and it's an important characteristic about any human being, right? That when you're thrown into a tough situation, because college is definitely hard, you're going to be challenged a lot. So they want to see someone who's faced failure and can still get out of that with success. So that is something that really helped me a lot when I was applying for my applications, and definitely something that I didn't take to heart, thankfully. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten into my master's program.
Yeah, I think another big thing is just like genuinely try hard, because I don't think trying hard is ever gonna not help you. Means, oh, you might not have time, which is kind of, if you ask me, an excuse that sort of gets fabricated. But like trying hard is never gonna not help you. You'll get better grades even if you don't want to. You can work on your SAT even if you don't want to. Even your passion project sometimes. Like those are the things you need to try really hard on. And when overall you just become like a really hard worker, even when you write your essays, you're not gonna write, oh, I tried hard, but just the way you write and the experiences you've had, they can see it, because it's not crafted, it's not fabricated out of thin air, but it's like a genuine thing.
Yeah, and there's going to be like 10 things, right, in your application process: your grades, your SAT, your ACT, your AP courses, and a bunch of other things, right? There are some people who will get all 10 of them perfect, but there are many who won't get all of them perfect. So if you do mess up one or two things, make sure the other 8 things are like excellent and make up for the mistakes that you made in those couple of things. So there's always room for improvement, and if you do mess up something, it's not the end of your journey. You can still keep trying hard and improving the other things about your application, and you'll still end up in a very good university.
Yeah, so that's honestly a really good point to leave off at. Thank you so much, Kshitij and Laksh, for being on here today. I appreciate you guys so much. Make sure to tune in for next week's episode on Thursday if you do want to learn something new. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.